night falls on the Pacific, the land of sunshine and surf transforms into a shadowy city of angels, teeming with sinister and surreal forms of entertainment. Interested in exploring this labyrinthine landscape of nighttime terrors? Then come along with us, if you dare. Welcome to the Hollywood Gothique podcast for the week of September 23rd, 2016. We are brought to you by HollywoodGothique.com, the entertainment guide for fantasy films, mystery movies, sci-fi cinema, and Halloween horror events in Los Angeles. Today's feature will be a roundtable interview with three of the creative team from this year's highly anticipated Wicked Lit Halloween Theater Festival, which opens next week. Before that, however, let's review a few Halloween events currently in operation and take a look at some others scheduled to open shortly. First up, reviews of Halloween Horror Nights, Six Flags Magic Mountain Fright Fest, and the Knott's Berry Farm Halloween Haunt. Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios Hollywood. Well, the mazes are great, but the lines are not worth the wait. You cannot see everything with a general admission ticket, so you will need a fast pass. For us, the Exorcist maze is a must-see highlight with some nice effects and a great use of total darkness to spring surprises on the audience. We also enjoyed the year-round Walking Dead attraction and the Purge Gauntlet of Fear, which is a scare zone, actually more like an outdoor maze, filled with lots of activity and lots of decoration. Very nicely done. Other good stuff too, but those are the ones that stood out for us. Six Flags Magic Mountain Fright Fest continues to improve. This used to be sort of an also-ran among Halloween theme park attractions, but lately, over the course of the past few years, they've upped the ante quite a bit, have better sets, better effects, and so now they're able to compete with the big boys. This year's new maze is Aftermath 2 Chaos Rising. It features the same apocalyptic ambiance as last year's Chaos walkthrough, but the layout is revamped and loaded with surprises, creating a new experience filled with exciting pandemonium. We also highly recommend two returning mazes, Willoughby's Resurrected, an excellent depiction of a haunted house, and Red's Revenge, a demented variation on Little Red Riding Hood with some wonderful fairy tale settings. There's also a new scare zone based on Suicide Squad featuring the Joker and Harley Quinn. Knott's Berry Farm Halloween Haunt. As usual, Knott's Scary Farm overwhelms with sheer numbers. There's so much to see that you're bound to like something. This year, the skeleton key rooms have been separated from the mazes, which is a good decision because they slowed down the lines. In these rooms, visitors enter in groups of a half dozen for a more intimate scare experience lasting a few minutes. All four skeleton key rooms are worth visiting this year, but our favorite was Visions, in which guests are handed an iPad-like ghost detector, which displays phantoms that are invisible to the naked eye. The highlight of this year's Knott's Scary Farm was Fear VR, a new virtual reality experience set in a mental hospital that has been overrun by a terrifying psychic girl. Achieved with goggles and headphones, the virtual simulation of being pushed on a wheelchair through the chaos is amazing. The new Shadowlands maze is also a triumph. Based around a samurai theme, it evokes some of the feel of a J-horror film, but its roots actually go back even further toward more traditional Japanese ghost stories set in feudal times. The maze features some great atmosphere and some really nice aerial stunts. Don't miss it. Now let's note a few events opening over the course of the next week. Paramount After Dark Tours, Tales from the Other Side, begins this weekend with performances on September 23rd and 24th. The 2.5-hour walking tour includes access to the adjacent Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Expect spooky tales of Hollywood's haunted past. This event runs on Fridays and Saturdays through November 5th. Queen Mary's Dark Harbor in Long Beach opens on Thursday, September 29th. Several new attractions are debuting this year. Intrepid, a walkthrough, Panic, a 4D virtual experience, Hex, a paintball gallery, and the Voodoo House Bar and Tasting Room, along with such returning mazes as Dead Rise and The Circus. Also opening on the 29th is Delusion, the immersive and dramatic combination of haunted house walkthrough and theatrical experience. Unfortunately, the show is already sold out, but some tickets are available on Craigslist. There is also a chance the run may be extended in November. This is one of the greatest Halloween events in Los Angeles, so it's worth the extra effort to score a ticket. You can get more information on these and other events at our website, HollywoodGothique.com. Now let's turn our attention to our main feature, Wicked Lit. This is one of our favorite Halloween events in Los Angeles, topping Hollywood Gothique's annual Halloween Haunt Awards on multiple occasions. It features 3 short plays based on classic literature staged in the Mountain View Mausoleum and Cemetery. The audience follows characters through a variety of settings, both inside and out, led by story guides who often play roles in the unfolding dramas. This year's plays are From Beyond, The Shadowy Third, and Anansi and the Demons. There is also a wraparound called Camp Mountain View, which serves to tie the 3 plays together, and it also gives the audience something to do after finishing one play while they're waiting for the next one to begin. With us today to discuss the 2016 incarnation of Wicked Lit are Trey Nichols, Bruce Gray, and Jamie Robledo. Trey adapted From Beyond, the H.P. Lovecraft story. Jamie is directing Anansi and the Demons. Bruce Gray directed The Shadow Third. And let me start with Jamie. Tell us about Anansi and the Demons. This isn't based on a story in the sense of, this is Poe or Lovecraft or something. It's actually based on some traditional proverbs and stories. Did you have much to do with the development, or did they hand you a script and say, run with it?
Now, this is Jonathan Josephson's baby, JJ. He's a big fan of history and literature, and just kind of world cultures. And last year he did Grove of Rashomon. And that took place in feudal Japan. And I believe that, Wicked Lit, just doesn't want to focus on just Western Europeans. So he's been doing a lot of research about West African culture and their horror tales. And basically, Jonathan took from all these various folk tales and fables, which sound remarkably like, Aesop, and they have their own version of Tortoise and Hare, and he took from the best of them and made this amalgamation. It's a really fun piece. It's going to be set, Anansi and the Demons is set in the cemetery, and so we use, if you've ever been there, it's a really creepy place, and when you walk in, and we make it even creepier, and just there's so much darkness and void there that we play with that, and then what we do is we wanted to add to the oral tradition of the Anansi and the storytelling aspect of it. So, we kind of start our story proper by a fireplace, which kind of is what the frame of the whole night of Wicked Lit is. But our story begins in a fireplace as well. And then we use the traditions of puppetry, and it's, there's no projections. It's all physical analog theater. So we live in the world that they would, and see the stories they would have told in kind of the way they would have told it. And then we tell this great ironic tale of British imperialism and some comeuppance. So it's fun.
Okay, you mentioned the cemetery setting, and I'm wondering, are these plays scripted with the settings in mind, or did Jonathan write the story and give it to you and say, well, where should we put this?
I think all of the writers who have written before do write with some semblance of where they would like the piece to be. And I think Jonathan, being one of the creators of Wicked Lit, knows where. Now, he didn't tell me where to put anything, but he knows, how long the show needs to be. He knows what we can get away with technically, and if it's too all over the map, then it makes it hard to produce. So he has a path in mind, but he doesn't. He just gave it to me, and when you read the script, it's kind of readily. It's very easy to see. Oh, this is where we do a scene, and then we go somewhere else, and then we do another scene, and we go somewhere else. He doesn't put any kind of restrictions on me, and he leaves it wide open, and he's like, there's a demon that flies through the air and pees on people, and you go ahead, Jamie, why don't you make something up? There's a demon that starts as a bird and then shape shifts into a tornado. Find a way to do it, and I love that kind of thing.
So, hardest thing about staging a play in a cemetery, what would that be?
It's a cemetery. Most of our rehearsals have to be during the day. It's much easier to block a show during the day, but that means that it is an active cemetery and people are grieving and they're holding ceremonies or they want a quiet moment. If there are people that are visiting their dead grandmother in the middle of where you should be doing your scene, you got to go get a taco until they're done.
And I guess you really must have a hard time imagining what the atmosphere is going to be like when you do the thing at night if you're rehearsing during daylight hours.
Luckily, I've been in there during the evening long enough to kind of understand what that is. But things that you think might be creepy are not creepy when the technical elements are added, and things you hadn't even thought of are terrifying. And we have an amazing technical staff and technically creative staff, and they just add so much to it. And we play with a lot of sound design. So hearing scary sounds in the darkness in a cemetery is always frightening.
Up next, let's go with Trey Nichols.
Hello.
You adapted From Beyond based on the Lovecraft story. This was, I guess we could say, workshopped, in the summer of 2015. So this isn't the first production of From Beyond, but you've got a different director. Maybe first we can talk about the problems of adapting Lovecraft, and then about how it's developed, how the play has developed and changed from what we saw a year and a half ago to what it is now.
Sure.
So dear old HP, he wrote some pretty slim stories, and From Beyond, it's kind of spooky, creepy, but really the plot, such as it is just there to introduce a concept, which is there's creepy stuff all around you and you just don't know about it. And if you did, you'd really freak out. But there's not a lot of story there. So I guess what you had to come up with is some plot and characters.
That's exactly right. And so, yes, Lovecraft is often heavy on description, mood, tone, adjective, and maybe a central concept. But what really grabbed me about From Beyond in terms of adaptation, because I'd read a number of stories with adaptation for Wicked Lit in mind of Lovecraft's and other authors, was this the relationship that between the unnamed narrator, who I've named Howard Phillips, and I think Lovecraft readers will understand where the name Howard Phillips comes from, and this kind of mad scientist, genius, rogue, friend of his, and so that friendship struck me as interesting and a great way to start. But as you mentioned, the story is a little slim. But at the end of the story, there's reference to a police investigation, and so I thought, aha, why not, use the police procedural as a kind of a template, and so we'll start, like in the present tense with an investigation. Howard Phillips was found at the scene of the disappearance of Crawford Tillinghast in his attic laboratory, and gunshots were heard, so that's what drew the attention of the police. And then we have to kind of work backwards, because Phillips is sort of maybe a suspect. There may have been a murder. All we know is Tillinghast has disappeared. And so hopefully, without giving away too many spoilers, we learned what happened earlier that evening. And we learned a little bit about the friendship between Tillinghast and Phillips over the years. And so my idea was that maybe Phillips has chosen a respectable path in science and has, many peers in the scientific field, and Crawford Tillinghast has been kind of a loner, and they have this tenuous friendship that has been sustained over the years. They both attended Miskatonic University in I believe it's in Providence, Rhode Island, and so Tillinghast has contacted Phillips to let him know that he has broken down the barriers and discovered a way to enter or find these dimensions that other dimensions that exist at our very elbows, that are here, not out in outer space or far away, but right here. And so we kind of learned, through the police procedural process, what happened earlier in the evening. And so the play progresses from the police office to Tillinghast's home to then his laboratory, where we get to see in flashback, what happened. Tillinghast has created this macabre, amazing machine that he claims releases, ultraviolet light, and through the ultraviolet you can it acts as a gateway. The machine is a gateway to these other worlds that exist right here, only in another plane.
Right. It's a gateway to from beyond, right?
That's right. From beyond. Beyond is that place that is right here, but just we can't sense it, or we have no access to it. But his machine has allowed through ultraviolet a way to access, and it's kind of a bridge to that other side.
And at this point, with Wicked Lit having been in the Mountain View Mortuary Mausoleum since 2010, I think, were you pretty sure as you were writing the play that this is where it would be staged? And were you thinking, where can I put this? Where would be the settings? Because, like I said, the summer version was set only in the chapel, and from the photos I've seen, the preview photos, it looks like we're going to see an expanded version this Halloween.
That's right. I did write with the mausoleum in mind, but there are always 3 shows, and so different spaces and venues within the mausoleum and cemetery are claimed or in use by other plays, and so the show really has to run like clockwork. I mean, all 3 plays have to, they're all taking place simultaneously, and the audience is divided into 3 groups, but you can't have actors doing scenes from different plays within proximity that might distract audiences from one show to another. So I kind of relied on Jeff Rack, my amazing director and the technical director and producing artistic director of Wicked Lit and Unbound Productions. He's the director of this production. And so he kind of had in mind where we were going to travel, because we needed basically 4 locations. We need a jail cell, a police inspector's office, the foyer of Tillinghast's home, and then Tillinghast's attic laboratory. But fortunately, the mausoleum is large enough that didn't become a problem.
What would you say is like the biggest difference between what we saw like in the summer and what's going to happen this Halloween?
Well, I think the special effects have been ramped up. This is about as immersive theater gets. Jamie had talked about a creature that pees on the audience members. There are going to be effects not unlike that. I think that the audience will really experience the from beyond dimension in very visceral ways. And I think that's exciting. We stretched out the piece somewhat. Jeff and I really worked on this together, on developing the script. It was a real tight collaboration. And so I think you'll see some of the character motivations are a little different. Some of the characters have changed somewhat. But I think that pretty much it's intact. Everything we accomplished in the chapel, now you'll just kind of see, as we move around different parts of the mausoleum.
What's the main thing you would think that would get somebody to go, oh, God, I've got to see this?
Well, I think that there's this incredible dark descent, and this sense of foreboding doom as we get closer and closer to what actually happened when Tillinghast turned on his machine for Dr. Phillips. And I think that the effects in place are going to be quite special, quite fun and spooky and creepy. And again, as I say, immersive. I mean, there are actual, visceral elements that the audience will experience. I just love the way that we start from this jail cell to the inspector's office, then to Tillinghast's home, to the laboratory. When we get there, I think that there's a real strong payoff for what happened, and I think the audiences will be thrilled. I think it's going to be a really special production. I think it's one of the most technically ambitious productions I've seen at Wicked Lit, and I'm a fan of Wicked Lit. I've been going for years, and so it was a thrill to write and adapt this piece and to be accepted for last year's reading and then the full production this fall.
Let's turn to Bruce Gray, who's been sitting by silently while we discussed everything else. You're directing The Shadowy Third this time, which Paul Millay adapted from a story by Ellen Glasgow. Tell us a little bit about your episode.
It's Paul has taken this story of hers, which has a number of characters in it, various sizes and so on, and altered it and reduced it into a very symmetrical and shapely piece with 4 actors, with 4 equally sized parts, and he's really written it with the space in mind. So we actually go from room to room in the mausoleum itself, and each room acting as a set And we're actually really trying to use the mausoleum as opposed to trying to build stuff in the mausoleum. So it's very clever on his part to have created this, and he's workshopped it and refined it. And then, of course, when we worked on it, we had to adapt it specifically to the space, which was a lot of fun to work on. You know, especially as the other people on the show have mentioned, we have an incredible creative staff with the sound and the lighting just being terrific. But it's a wonderful story of a young psychiatrist who is coming to determine the mental condition of the mother in the play, who seems to have gone mad, and now what to do with her, and her shy little daughter, who seems to be trying to make contact with the psychiatrist, and how the story unfolds after that. I'm leery about going into too many details because I don't want to give away anything. But it's just a terrific yarn, you know. And Halloween is ghost stories, and this has the elements of a ghost story, but it's also there's many things to Halloween. There's the creepy factor, the scary factor, the ghostly things, sometimes even funny things in Halloween. You know, it's I guess it's a holiday with a lot of different aspects to it, and this play very much plays on many of those. So it's very well crafted. Paul Millet, who is also, he's a director in his own right, but he is directing the fourth part of the evening, which is what they call the frame, which is a big campfire that all the audience keep returning to between each of the plays.
We had some mention before about, you know, the difficulties of staging in the mausoleum in terms of 3 shows running simultaneously, and so now I'm wondering whether there's some element of directing traffic to this, making sure that the 2 or 3 groups of audience members don't collide in an intersection somewhere. Is that an aspect of this, Bruce?
It's very much an aspect, and we don't quite know yet. And it isn't until we start to do the rotations that we'll find out, because we are sharing the mausoleum, which is comprised of many, many rooms, but we are sharing it. And the conceit of our show is that there's nobody in this giant space but the four characters. So if we heard any odd yelling or carrying on because of another play, it might be hard to explain what that was, but we won't know until we actually get in rotation, and that'll be something we'll discover in the next this coming weekend.
Is there a particular technical challenge or to this one? What would you say was the greatest technical challenge or directing challenge to getting this one off the page and into the mausoleum?
I think part of it is how to manage the audience as they move from space to space, so they stay concentrated on the story and don't let the little walk around from room to room get them distracted by their own situation. You know, do you have to go to the bathroom, or did you get the potato chips, or whatever might engage an audience, but to keep them forever riveted on the story. And then we have a ball effect, a little ball that rolls around, and it mustn't seem to appear from anywhere. It just starts rolling around, and technically managing that. And each roll around of the ball is in a different space, requiring different mechanisms to make it work, and to get it just right, so we don't clock into the audience with this ball as it rolls around. So it's very tricky. And we have Jeff Rack can't be praised enough. He's our set designer and our trick designer, as it were, the mechanisms of the thing. And he and I know each other because we have a different relationship. I director over at Theater 40 in Beverly Hills, and he's our resident set designer. So I have a long, very happy and productive relationship with him, and he just won an award for Designer of the Year, something that just came out. So we were both happy recipients of that, and Jeff is just a great guy to work with, and he's been so helpful in creating the kind of space that we're in and moving it around. And now we'll find out if we're going to run into each other, and I have no idea. We just have to work in this amazing space. You've been there to the mausoleum, and you know what it's like. I mean, it's a colossal, massive building with these rose windows and Tiffany glass and beautiful tile work and Corinthian marble. It's a breathtaking space, and when it's lit, it's a real experience simply to be in that space and see it lit at night for a show. So it's a great thing about madness and manipulation and addictions, and many issues are dealt with in this story that are real Halloween fodder, and they come to a crashing climax at the end, and it's just breathtaking.
You mentioned this concept of keeping the audience concentrated on the story during the walk-arounds or walks through, and it caught my attention because it seemed to me as if during the first year or two of Wicked Lit, there would be a scene in a setting, the guide would take you to the next setting, and the play would resume there. And I think since then, over the past few years, there seems to have been more of an attempt to integrate those transitions, those walking periods into the story. Is that just my imagination, or is that a real thing? It's there's more attempt to say something's going to be happening, some effect or something. It's not just, okay, it's kind of like a little mini intermission while we walk to scene 2. You know?
Exactly. I think that's been happening. I don't know how other people have handled it, and each situation is unique depending on the conceit of the entire evening, which is a kind of a campfire scene in our thing, where you meet around a campfire and tell ghost stories, and then the ghost stories sort of evolve into the space. And Paul has and I have worked together very hard to try to make the audience constantly engaged in either the story or the space in which the story evolves. And the architecture of this mausoleum is stunning. I can't begin to tell you. It's a high Romanesque building with one of the great rose windows that you'll see in all of California. I mean, it's breathtaking. It's one of the masterpieces of medieval architecture, and that they've reproduced it here so brilliantly. And just to keep the audience engaged in the space between the scenes, keeps them in the story. We have a guide that takes them through and wrangles them as they go from scene to scene, and to carry the mood of one scene into another. So it's been very exciting. I don't know how it's been solved in the past. I'm sure as the 3 producers have looked at the show over the years, they've refined it, and made it more shapely, and so that as each year goes on, it gets more focused and more immersive. And I got to tell you, by the way, I've been to many of these Wicked Lit shows, as you have, and one of the things that delights me is the audience, because many of them seem like not regular theater goers. They seem more like, oh God, I don't know what to say, tourists. Maybe I don't mean that in a pejorative way. They just don't seem like regular audience, and their delight in seeing the show, these ghost stories and horror stories, all happening in this incredible space in a mausoleum. I mean, there are bones of dead people tucked into the walls. It's got its own creep factor about it. So I love watching the audience sometimes, just as a director coming in and seeing somebody else's show, just to see their delight in being there and sharing these ghost stories at Halloween.
Following up on this concept of integration and so forth, I guess since the second or third year or so, there's been a tendency to write the story guides, the people who guide the audience from one room to another into the plots as supporting characters. So I guess maybe this is really a script writing question, so I'll throw it to Trey Nichols. Is there any kind of like brief or template or something that you're given when you write one of these scripts? Like, oh yeah, we really want the story guide to be somehow integrated into the story.
Well, when I first approached adapting From Beyond, I brought the question to Jonathan Josephson. He's the executive director, and he was my my main contact, going into this process. And he said, not really. I mean, it's kind of up to the writer. And so I, as I had mentioned, I kind of expanded on or built the foundation of the play on the idea of the police procedural. And so my story guide is a Deputy Littlewit, who talks to the audience and kind of ushers them in, but he's also, part of the investigation. So, but I know there are shows that incorporate a story guide simply for that purpose, who stands outside of the action of the story and is just there as kind of the audience liaison. But there's no real rule to that. I think it's just whatever works for each particular play.
It's also how it serves the story. Like, I love the idea of integrating the story guide somehow into the show. There's something immersive about that he is a liaison between the audience and the show. And when he becomes part of the show, it gets to be kind of interesting. But in our play, we realized that if there was a story guide who was part of our story, he would be a way out of this hermetically sealed situation that would stop the story's containment. He'd be able to resolve something. He would be able to call the police. He would be able to do something or other if he was even in the room. So he has to stay outside of it in our particular story.
Now, in a sense, the two of you are newbies, I guess, in the sense that Jeff Rack and Jonathan Josephson and Paul Millay pretty much wrote and directed all the plays for the first couple years. I'm going to call this the Seinfeld question, based on
I can hardly wait to hear the question.
Based on the show. The Seinfeld show went on 9 years, and eventually there was the core team that did the first few seasons, and then other people came in later. And when you see some of the interviews of these later people who came in, they'd say, well, we would like comment on things we'd seen in the show before, or basically some of their stuff was like in response to things they had been a fan of. It's like, oh, I like this, so I did more with that character. Or there was something goofy about a stand-up comedian being an actor, so let's do an episode about how Jerry can't show emotions or something. And so what I'm wondering is, like, as kind of the newbies who come in having seen the old episodes, is there anything you're looking at and going, well, I like this, but not that so much. Here's what I'd like to retain, or the things they achieved that I want to do again, versus, oh, here's where I think I can add something, of my own that'll make it better or different or fresh.
I was going to say it took so much of everything I had to try to engineer, to block this story in the situation and have it seem organic and natural, that I didn't have one single thought about what happened in the past. Although Paul, who is familiar, would say, it's okay to do that because the audience will accept it. Or in this case, let your storyteller be the guide in a situation, so that he would act as the man making those decisions. But it took all the energy I had to just get the story told, the performances honed, and all the technical stuff just around it. So I didn't have any reference to anything in the past.
And Trey?
Well, I can tell you that, as a newbie, semi-newbie, because I've been to a number of Wicked Lit shows in the past, so I kind of knew, how it all worked. The shows that really grabbed me the most were those that had a strong emotional center, and it's, maybe a challenge finding that in Lovecraft, but that was important to me, that all the spooky horror elements were supported by a really strong emotional foundation between these two central characters, Phillips and Tillinghast. But I will say that Jeff Rack really was very supportive, and we had some very, very intense script meetings where we just kind of went over the whole script line by line. And because he had really kind of he's done this so often, and he really knows the mausoleum, he knows all the technical capabilities, that I really trusted him, in terms of his advice and guidance in terms of building the script. But I tell you, going into this, I really wanted something that had an emotional resonance and wasn't just, Lovecraft spooky, but, Lovecraft with a heart, I guess I would say, with some kind of emotional resonance between these two characters.
Part of the reason I asked this, and again, a lot of this stuff is subjective impression. I haven't gone back and done an analysis of it specifically, but it seemed to me the first few years I attended, they tended to begin the same way, which was two people talking to each other and basically kind of dumping the exposition onto us before things kicked in. And I don't think that's really happened for the last 2 or 3 seasons that I've noticed. It seems like there's more of a tendency like, well, let's get into the thing. And yeah, it may be 2 characters, but they're not just standing around. They're doing something,
Right.
So again, I don't know. Is this just my imagination, or is this a thing that's developed? Did someone notice that and say, oh, God, I wish we could just get this moving a little bit faster,
I think there's always a drive to just make the stories as strong as possible and to keep the audience, and the audience experience in mind. And so perhaps there was feedback from audience members, or at the annual postmortem where they talk about the plays and what worked and what didn't, and maybe there's kind of a forward moving honing process as they try to work along the lines that you suggested.
They found a niche, these immersive theater experiences. We have one in Beverly Hills with Greystone Mansion. That is an immersive thing in the Doheny family, and you go from room to room and experience it. There was a Tamara that was played at the Masonic Lodge down on North Highland, and they have created this one. And because it's a mausoleum, it already has ghostly qualities about it. So what they've done, though, they're so committed to it. And they are so detail-oriented and so willing to expand it every year and take a bigger chance and do something more creative, so that inevitably each season is better than the one before. And they've just gotten better and better. And the difference, I suspect, between season 1 and 2 and this year is enormous, just because they've refined it. They found out what works. They've added that. They've taken out what didn't work. And it's now a much more polished enterprise.
Anything we've overlooked, anything we haven't mentioned that you'd want to bring up or say about the show that would entice people to come around this year?
I feel like, kind of on echoing what Bruce said a little while ago, this Wicked Lit seems to just grow exponentially each year, not just in ambition and scope and excellence, but it's beyond theater in a way. It's become a real fall cultural phenomenon for Southern California. I think it's a real, not to be missed show, and I just hope it keeps, growing from year to year. I think it's just really exciting. And you go, I see a lot of theater in LA, and I see a lot of people I know at, various shows. And as Bruce had also mentioned, you see a lot of people that don't seem like, average theater goers. They're just here because, they've either been coming to Wicked Lit for years, or they've heard about it and they know about it. And there's something just really exciting about this event, especially, for the fall season, because of that kind of spooky element, and that it's site specific, it's immersive. And I think people should definitely check it out if you haven't been. And if you have, please come again. I think it's going to be a really great year.
Jamie.
I think there's a social component to this show that resonates today with what's going on in our country, and more so than I thought when I took the job. And there are several allusions that we make, and I really think it's relevant. I really think it's smart, and it's oddly I think going to be the funniest piece, because there's a sharp wit in there and a really interesting sense of irony.
Okay, and Bruce?
Often Halloween is focused so much on children and getting candy. on the streets and some decorations. This is a Halloween experience that's totally different, and it's much more focused for adults. And it's the joy of storytelling. And it starts off in our little frame about storytelling around a campfire, and then it starts to expand in these three major stories that the audience share. So I think it's more of a grown-up. It not meant that younger kids can't enjoy it, but it really is a grown-up experience, and a delightful one, and unique. It's like nothing else you've ever seen. And that, I think, is reason enough to come and see it.
I want to thank all my guests, Jamie Robledo, Trey Nichols, and Bruce Gray, for chatting with me about their efforts. Wicked Lit opens with a preview performance on Thursday, September 29th. Regular performances begin on Saturday, October 1, and continue through November 6 on weekends and some weekdays. Tickets start at $40, with prices varying according to date. There is also a post-show backstage experience. For an additional fee, 12 guests may join the show's creators for a behind-the-scenes tour loaded with anecdotes about the tremendous effort that goes into staging plays in a mausoleum. The address of Mountain View Mausoleum and Cemetery is 2300 Marengo Avenue, Altadena 91001. Call 818-242-7910 for more information, or visit unboundproductions.org to purchase tickets. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the dark. This podcast and all its content